popularity of a champion is directly proportional to how broken they are. Power does influence popularity, but the idea that characters who are popular are only popular because they're strong is actually complete BS. Like absolute and utter BS. And the way to think about this actually is to compare a character like Kai'Sa to a character like Old Aurelion Sol. Kai'Sa is a character who can have a 45% win rate and still be played one of the most champions in the game. Kai'Sa can be brutally underpowered and still be played non-stop because people like Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa's a fun character. She's got a great theme and a really, really fun kit. Comparatively, Old Aurelion Sol at various times had a 56 to 58% win rate, probably one of the strongest mid laners you could play in terms of the ability to win the game, and absolutely nobody wanted to touch him, all the way up to high MMR. And so it's a thing where it's like, there are certain types of characters and kits that regardless of what you do, people will not want to play them. It doesn't matter what you do, they just won't hold an audience. And there are other types of characters and kits who, regardless of what you do, they'll still have some amount of play rate. Now, of course, does that mean Kai'Sa is going to be as popular when she's super weak as when she, as other times? No, definitely not. Like, if Kai'Sa is strong, she's going to be way more popular. But kind of noting that, like, sometimes people will be like, well, the reason this thing isn't being played is because it's weak. And if you just buffed it to be just as strong as Kai'Sa, it would be played more. And be like, yes, it would be played more. Weak characters will 100% be played more when they're strong. But the difference between an unpopular and a popular character usually is not their strength. It usually is some combination of their theme and their kit. You have to realize that you all do the new Monster Champ dirty with their gameplay kits. Do you see SKARNAR win rate? He's already been pro jailed at 44%. Yes, that's unlucky. But I would argue SKARNAR overall does have a fun kit, assuming it's allowed to be powerful. And SKARNAR, when he came out, was still not as popular as, someone else, right? That doesn't mean SKARNAR is bad. I want to be very, very clear with you. I'm not saying SKARNAR is bad in any way, but it's just kind of noting that yes, monster champions are for a more niche audience. And that's fine. We should make monster champions, and we should serve that niche audience at various times. We just did when we updated SKARNAR. Did I help design SKARNAR? So I was the design lead on the team at the time we were making SKARNAR's kit, so I will not take credit for his design in that sense, but, for the last few years I've been helping design, to some degree, all the champions, where it's like, hey, one of the design lead's jobs is to, ensure that characters are up to a certain quality bar, but also, help designers hit it. So it's like, hey, here's this thing is working, this thing's not working, and I'll talk to people about how to make things work better or worse, or whatever, right? So I did help out with SKARNAR in the sense that I was a design lead and helped make some calls on the project, but I did not design the kit. That was that was Llama. Llama was the main designer for SKARNAR. So he also did Smolder. He's also one of the people who worked on Smolder. How many champions do you say it's reasonable to expect to be in a good spot at any given time? I would argue the majority of them, but it's possible that my definition of good spot is different than yours. My definition of good spot is not that a champion is played in pro. It is not that a champion is viable in high elo. My definition of a good spot is for the people who want to play that champion, they can play it and enjoy it and feel like they're not trolling. Which means for a character like Garen, that means he's good for silver players, right? For a character like Nidalee, it probably means she's pretty strong in high MMR, because, that's the reward for playing Nidalee is you go higher MMR. And so to me, I would argue that most of the time, the majority of league champions are legitimately in a good spot. And I think that remains true even now, as an example. But there's a difference between, being viable and being OP. And there's a difference between being slightly weak and being worthless, right? So I think a good spot for a lot of characters can be to be slightly weak. I don't think they have to be top of the meta or god tier picks. And I think a good spot for a lot of characters can be strong, even if they're and not OP, right? So it just depends on the character. Thoughts on HECARIM? I think we're doing some work on HECARIM at the moment. I can't remember though, but we're doing some adjustments to him. Any thought on EKKO? I think EKKO and FIZZ got a little bopped by the item changes and probably need a little bit. But they win more than 50% of their games, so it's hard to justify buffing them. But personal opinion is EKKO and FIZZ are a little weak. AP Assassins, basically. After all the adjustments to the AP Assassin items, I think they ended up in a somewhat bad spot. Ziggs has been between 49 and 48 for all season. Is he on your radar? I think someone's talked about maybe a mid-scope for him. Ziggs has the very classic bot lane mage problem, which is he can't be a functional mid laner because he's tuned around being being bot lane. And there's just this whole subset of mages that, like, whenever they're even slightly viable bot lane, we, like, have to nerf them. And then it's just like, well, they're never going to be able to be viable. They're going to have a very, I shouldn't say never. I should say they're going to have a very hard time being viable mid when every time we try to buff them for mid, we have to nerf them for bot. So there's still this, like, really weird kind of balance inconsistency in League of Legends where you have this class of champions who counters bot lane, is good against bot laners, and it's very, very underplayed down there, meaning that even when they're strong, very few people play them. But, like, they're kind of handcuffed to that role's win rate in terms of how powerful they can be. And the end result is characters like Ziggs tend to end up feeling a bit worse for, like, people like in mid because he has to be balanced for this bot lane. Should he be in bot lane in the first place? Well, that's the thing, is it's hard to get him out of bot lane because he's good against bot laners, right? Ever since 8.11, mages have been viable in bot lane. And, you know, we could do some major changes, like give all the AD carries back their health regen and nerf mage early mana to, like, make it so they're a lot worse down there. But mages just counter the bot lane meta. And so there's this weird thing. So this goes back to, like, let's go back to, like, our classic talking about win rate tuning. If you have a character who counters the meta, what is their win rate supposed to be? So you could look at Ziggs when he has a 53% win rate bot lane, and you could say that character is overpowered. His win rate's too high, AD carries can't survive against him, you need to nerf him. That's reasonable, especially if you want the bot lane meta to be very AD carry focused and we want to make sure AD carries feel good. Totally reasonable way to balance the game. Don't think there's anything wrong with that. The question, though, I would ask is, though, is a character who counters the bot lane meta actually OP at 53% win rate? That character might just be doing their job, if that makes sense. That character just might be, like, doing something they're good at, right? And so I think that's the challenge for me when I think about the bot lane mages who tend to win a lot around there, is, like, on one hand, yeah, they abuse AD carries, and that feels really bad. So from an AD carry player's perspective, if these characters have, like, win rates down there, yeah, you probably should nerf them. But from the other hand, it's like, but they counter the bot lane meta. Are they actually OP, or are they just doing what they're good at, right? And, you know, that's complicated. Like, as an example, I would imagine that bot lane mages actually feel a lot more fair if not everybody down there is an AD carry, right? Like, you see this in top lane, you see this in mid lane, right? There's a large diversity of champions in those roles, such that, like, you know, sometimes you get countered, sometimes you don't. And that probably, like, evens out counter picks. Whereas in bot lane, you know, everybody's an AD carry. And so if you have an AD carry counter pick, you're just, you know, you're going to crush it most of the time. And so a character who has a 53% win rate against the current meta, if there were more mages in the meta and more bruisers in the meta down bot lane, that character might not have that win rate anymore, even at the exact same, like, you know, kit tuning, just because they're no longer just going against a bunch of the same character. Anyways, it's a balance musing. At the end of the day, like, the way we do it is we say we're tuning bot lane generally for AD carries, and so if there's any characters that, like, are winning too much down there, we probably should nerf them so that the overall lane feels good. And I think that's a very reasonable way to balance the game. It does mean, though, that these mages are kind of in somewhat of a trap where they have a harder time being balanced in, like, mid lane when they're so strong against the meta bot. Which is why we did things like to save to Veigar, to make Veigar balanced in mid lane. We gave him just a bunch of scaling AP ratios to basically say it's like, hey, mid lane you get more levels, so that's like a tuning lever we can use to get you away from bot, as an example. Yeah.